Welcome to episode 20 of the American System of Political Economy podcast with none other than the current leading authority on the subject of American system, 19th century American system political economy, Mr. Neil Martin. Mr. Neil Martin is giving us more insight into the individual who Neil argues is the greatest political economist of the 19th century and perhaps the greatest political economist of all time until the emergence in the in the early to the middle 20th century of Lyndon H. LaRouche. We're talking about none other than Mr. Henry C. Carey. And in this presentation, Neil will be diving into the subject of money, which Henry Carey, in his wisdom, describes as the instrument of association. So as usual, I do the introduction, and then I pass it on to Neil for Neil to expand on the substance of the subject matter. So as I said in my brief preface, the introduction goes as such. The American system does the best banking. The instrument of association, money, has been misrepresented. The subject of money is rather mundane and soulless. Sir Robert Peel, one of the worst British prime ministers ever, the man who loved to buy in the cheapest market, is not going to circulate the currency. The currency's only destiny is with the physical economy. Peel did not have the currency seek employment. Government philosophy is an essential part of banking, but you will not find this in today's economist. The outcry is to get rid of the Fed, or to get rid of the Fed is led by those who think any entity can do anything better than the government, that banking should be left to the free market. The truth is that they see government as not having any attractive function. If people think the government has no attractive function, then they think government is for war, giving people freedom to make money any way they can and serving the financial oligarchy. What kind of view of man will this advocate? Banking has been slandered by leftists, and they do not see having an independent banking system as key to their independence and helping out of other countries. Were we to look at Carey's banking philosophy, could we dismiss it and say that it will do debt traps in foreign nations? Anyone would say that does not think money is the instrument of association. They just say that's something to hoard or something that is the root of all evil. We will go after the ones who want to hoard it. Those at the top who want to hoard it say Glass-Steagall is a threat. But the leftists saw Glass-Steagall the way an animal looks at a machine tool. They see no use for it. To see how potent Glass-Steagall is, it is one of 4 of Lyndon LaRouche's economic laws. The other 3 are national banking, a credit system to increase the energy flux density of the economy, and to fully launch nuclear power, to make breakthroughs in manned space program, and launch a crash program to develop fusion power. Would Henry Carey want to do this? Or would Sir Robert Peel, Mr. Buy in the cheapest market? How dangerous is it to buy the cheapest market? It does not want association. Buying in the cheapest market does not need association. Nor does it create association. If you want Sir Robert Peel, you shout for no association. Henry Carey's banking philosophy wants association, and money and credit will be used as instruments of association. Association makes use of the diversity of employment, and the more the diversity of employment, the greater the association. We have just spoken about banking philosophy, and money is an instrument of association. Money does not act upon the American system. The American system acts upon it. Too bad, leftists cannot learn that. Here is something leftists would say about Sir Robert Peel. Henry Carey is on another level. The latter understood, as Sir Robert Peel did not, the difference between transportation of money and its circulation. Transportation of money is the invisible hand line, circulation in the world land bridge. Transportation of money is letting water alone and letting out into the ocean. Circulating currency is diverting currency to places that can utilize that water. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Neil Merton. Mr. Neil, it's all yours.
Yes. So today's presentation is called Henry C. Carey, The American System Does the Best Banking. Good banking philosophy and bad banking philosophy. Next slide, Victor. It comes from Henry C. Carey's celebrated work, Social Science, Volume 2. The Principles of Social Science is the best book written in political economy in the 19th century. Volume 2 is probably my favorite out of the volumes. Next slide, Victor. Okay, so we have Sir Robert Peel versus Henry C. Carey. Sir Robert Peel is Mr. Buy in the cheapest market, and I only want to transport the currency, and I'm going to make banking laws that is not going to affect the economy in a positive manner. If Sir Robert Peel was alive, he'll jump up in glee and looking at how bad the banking sector is. The next person to the right is His Excellency Henry C. Carey. Henry C. Carey, when he wrote the Principles of Social Science, volumes 1 to 3, is he talking about money that much? No. He's banking on association. And we're going to find out more about association and banking philosophy in the presentation. Next slide, Victor. Okay. So only Henry Carey is allowed to talk about banking. Why is Henry Carey only allowed to talk about banking? Because the free trade school sees banking as a means to serve the financial oligarchy, a means to serve financial advocates, a means to only have the monetary advocates be used for pumping up the financial sector, the financial advocates. Henry Carey, on the other hand, wants to develop the physical economy, and money and credit will be circulated into the economy to grow the physical economy, to grow the wealth and grow the population. Yes, I said grow wealth and grow the population. That's an attack on Thomas Malthus, by the way. Okay, so banking philosophy. Henry Carey has a superior banking philosophy. His banking philosophy details what is the purpose of mankind, what's the purpose on government, and what's the purpose on banking. Yes, banking has a philosophy. Banking has a view of man. What banker do we know today are economists, or someone like Mark Carney, who's now the Prime Minister of Canada? What will they say about what is a banking philosophy? Let's see what Henry Carey has to say. A bank is an instrument of great power, either for good or evil. Well directed, it tends to the production of regularity of movement and certainty of result. And then it is that the latent faculties of man become developed, that agriculture becomes a science, that commerce grows, and that men become more free. Ill directed, it tends to the production of irregularity of movement, thus stimulating the gambling propensities of man and carrying him back towards that state of barbarism in which he becomes more and more the slave of nature and of his fellow man. So Henry Carey says the bank is an instrument of great power, either for good or evil. Henry Carey sees the bank as an instrument of good. And Henry Carey wants to do he wants to do three things with the bank. Number one, increase the latent faculties of man. Has a financier, oligarchy, or economist or leftist ever spoke about what's the purpose of a bank? Henry Carey is saying that the banks have to foster and develop the latent faculties of man. That is a high view of man. And that is a high expectation on banking. As I state, right? Who is going to say, oh, a bank or bankers or economists have to develop the latent faculties of man? The free trade crowd, the Sir Robert Peel crowd, who only wanted the transportation of money and not the circulation of the currency, they're not going to develop the latent faculties of man. You are not going to see this in a political economy book. You saw it with Henry Carey in the 19th century. Developing the latent faculties of man. Okay, well, what does Henry Carey say next? He says agriculture becomes a science. Now, how does agriculture become a science? Agriculture becomes a science when the farmer has the home market, where the farmer has association with various manufacturers, where the farmer is using scientific farming to get the best out of the land, but also replenishing the earth, right? And so you have a banking philosophy that states you want to make farm agriculture become a science. Agriculture is under attack by the Great Reset faction. They're saying you can't grow this much food. They're raising prices for energy. You have farmers in Mexico, in Europe, protesting, also in India, protesting about what the government and bankers say about farming. They say farming produces too much CO2. I mean, hey, if you want to say that, you're obviously not for increasing wealth and the population. Now, the only protectionist, the only economist that spoke about agriculture becoming a science and detailing what we need to have agriculture become a science are the protectionists. The only thing the free trade crowd said about agriculture, oh, the United States of America has good soil. They have a whole lot of fertile land. That's how the United States of America is going to become wealthy. That's why the United States of America is wealthy, because of its fertile land. Well, what about making agriculture a science? How can you make agriculture a science when you're importing food left and right? where you're not providing support for agriculture, where you have no domestic commerce. Remember the word association. Association helps out develop the latent faculties of man. It helps out agriculture, right? We want an agro-industrial economy. And if we have an agro-industrial economy, that's part of the physical economy. Agriculture as a science requires banking to be a science. Agriculture as a science needs for man to be created in the image of his creator and not an animal. So we got that part done. We have developed the latent faculties of man, which represents a high view of man. We have agriculture becoming a science, which means the farmer will have the home market and there will be massive domestic commerce. Then we have commerce grows. Henry C. Carey is saying a duty of the bank is to have commerce grow. What's the opposite of commerce? Foreign commerce. Now, I ask you this question. If you're transporting food and all these manufactured goods into your country, where's the circulation of currency? Where is the banking policy, right? Because the only time a bank is doing something right is when it's promoting association, right? And when you promote association, you grow commerce. You grow the physical economy. The currency is circulating. When the currency is circulating, man is useful. Man is contributing to the future. But when you have the currency just being in transportation, what is that? You just trade in currency, right? You're speculating. You're buying securities. That's not for the physical economy. How is speculating on the currency or speculating on commodities going to increase the latent faculties of man? It's not going to show any type of concern for agriculture as a science, and it's not going to show any type of concern for commerce. On to the next section, right? Okay, so Henry Carey is saying, okay, I just told you a good banking philosophy. What is the bad banking philosophy? Henry Carey says the bad banking philosophy enables man to be a gambling spirit. And gambling does not develop the economy. Henry Carey said, in times of free trade, let me repeat this, in times of free trade, the gambling spirit is most seen. In periods of free trade, bad banking philosophy goes hand in hand with free trade. Bad banking philosophy goes hand in hand, as I said again, with free trade, right? So what's happening? Henry Carey is saying we're in a state of barbarism, right? Man is becoming more and more a slave of nature and of his fellow man. So his fellow man is not taking responsibility before God and his fellow man. He is making man a slave of nature. Can a banking philosophy make man a slave of nature? Sir Robert Peel banked on making man a slave of nature. Free traders banked on making man the slave of nature, right? So we have two views. We're going to develop the latent faculties of man, or we're going to make mankind become a slave of nature. Which one is good? Which one is bad? Which one accepts free trade? Which one accepts domestic commerce? I'll let you all figure that out. Next slide, Victor. Association is needed for good banking. Notice how I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about association. And what Henry Carey is going to say about association, it's going to knock your socks off, right? Because he is taking banking philosophy on a whole new level. But not only that, Henry Carey wrote the best about banking. When I was reading Henry Carey's section on money as the instrument of association, several chapters in volume 2 of the Principles of Social Science, I enjoyed it. But if you give me a book by a free trader and they're talking about money, it's going to put people to sleep because they're not developing the latent faculties of man, and they see no purpose for the bank to promote commerce, right? So let's see what Henry C. Carey says about association. Association brings into activity all the various powers, mental and physical, of the being of whom society is composed. And individuality grows with the growth of power of combination. That power it is which enables the many who are poor and weak to triumph over the few who are rich and strong. And therefore it is that men become more free with every advance in wealth and population. To enable them to associate, there is required an instrument by help of which the process of composition, decomposition, and recomposition of various forces may readily be effected, so that while all unite to produce the effect desired, each have his share of the benefits thence resulting. Henry Carey says, association develops the various powers, mental and physical, of man. Right? Now, people might say, Neil, you're talking too much about association. Well, let's replace association with slavery. We're going to read the first sentence. Slavery brings into activity all the various powers, mental and physical, of the beings of whom society is composed. And individuality grows with the growth of power of combination. Well, I got news for you all. Slavery is not going to develop a diversity of employment. It is not going to develop a power of combination. Only association is, right? Oh, do you want me to use another word besides slavery? You said, oh, that's a little bit too harsh. Okay, environmentalism. Okay, environmentalism brings into activity all the various powers, mental and physical. Stop. Environmentalism is not going to develop the latent faculties of man. It's not going to show the various powers of man. It's going to limit man, right? So when Henry Carey talks about association, you can't replace it with slavery. You can't replace it with environmentalism. You can't replace it with buy cheap and sell dear. Okay, let's do it again. Buying in the cheapest market brings into activity all the various powers, mental and physical. Who do you think you're dealing with? When someone is saying buying in the cheapest market brings into activity the various powers of man, that is a bunch of baloney, right? Association is so powerful, right? And then we move to individuality, right? Henry Carey says, as individuality grows, power of combination grows. When Henry Carey is talking about association in all of his works, he's saying association creates power of combination. With association, you have a power of combination. And how do you get that power of combination? Individuality, diversity of employments. You want diversity of employments in your land, in your economy. But if you buy in the cheapest market, you're not going to have association. You're not going to have individuality. You're not going to have power of combination. But we are not done there yet, right? So we have spoken about association, individuality. We have said that association is not slavery. Association is not buying in the cheapest market. Association is not environmentalism. What is association going to do? Or power of combination. Henry Carey says that power in which enables the many who are poor and weak to triumph over the few who are rich and strong. And therefore it is that man becomes more free and every advance and with every advance in wealth and population. Association does that. Power of combination does that. If you are going to fight poverty, if you're going to fight the rich and the strong, you need association. You need power of combination, right? Bernie Sanders and AOC, communists, socialists, whatever they want to call themselves, right? They are not going to say, we are going to use association to have the poor and the weak triumph, right? Okay. Association is what we're going to use to have the poor and weak triumph. All right, so how is Henry C. Carey going to fight poverty, right? Well, here's what we're going to do, right? Okay, so I'm going to read something, right? Carey's ideas show that he knows how to make the poor and weak prevail. Look at his economic solutions. You can really tell, you can really know about someone if you know about their economic solutions, right? He puts it all into developing the physical economy, integrate the economy with rail, increase energy flux density, have the prices of raw materials and finished commodities approximate, grow domestic commerce, prove how man is not a slave of nature. Earth is the great labor savings bank. If Carey is saying this, he is calling for man to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. That's all association, right? If you want to increase energy flux density, increase association and individuality. If you want to integrate your economy with rail, you need association, right? If you want to have the raw materials and finished commodities approximate, you need association. That's circulation of the currency. If you're circulating the currency, the physical economy is being developed. And all I'm talking about is developing the physical economy. Prove how man is not a slave of nature. If you're proving how man is not a slave of nature, aren't you giving man powers to have him prevail? Man is not lacking powers. The free trade school would completely not recognize this. They will say, oh, God is a big blunderer, right? And then we say, Earth is the great labor savings bank. Now, who is going to take advantage of Earth as the great labor savings bank? Are environmentalists? Hell no, right? Who is going to take advantage of Earth as the great labor savings bank? People who say buy in the cheapest market? Do people who say, okay, we want slavery and slavery is going to allow for us to make Earth the great labor savings bank? That is a bunch of baloney. I don't want people telling me, well, Neil, there's another way to develop the economy. It's not with association. We have to protect the planet. The Green New Deal will protect the planet and develop the economy. It ain't going to do that, right? It's not going to bring about a power of combination. And what is a power of combination? Man uniting in pursuit for an object that shows their creativity, right? How can slavery show creativity? How can environmentalism show creativity? How can buying the cheapest market show creativity? But association can show creativity. And why? It circulates the currency. If you're circulating the currency, you're supporting you are supporting the physical economy, right? And lastly, okay, what are you going to get out of this? Power of combination. Well, power of combination is going to do wonders with saying Earth is the great labor savings bank. Now, if you go with Earth as the great labor savings bank, what economic solution are you going to propose? Are you going to propose the Green New Deal? Are you going to propose hyperinflation? Are you going to propose derivatives? Are you going to promote the crypto? No. When I think of Earth as the great labor savings bank, complements of association, because the person who created association in physical economy, Henry C. Carey, said Earth is the great labor savings bank. And the economic solution that Earth is the great labor savings bank, what is it going to do? It's going to build the biggest war avoidance policy ever. Now ask yourself this question. Is pursuing the greatest war avoidance policy ever, is that going to create more circulation of the currency, or is building up a cryptocurrency gonna do the job? You pick. Growing cryptocurrency, the next big bubble, or building the biggest war avoidance policy ever, China's Belt and Road Initiative, right? We're going to need association. And as I said, association is needed for good banking. We are not going to get the Belt and Road Initiative if we have economies that are not devoted towards association. Slavery is not going to bring about the BRI. Environmentalism is not going to do that. Buying in the cheapest market, Sir Robert Peel, they're not going to do that. Okay, next slide, Victor. Okay, what a physical economy needs. We're going to talk about the currency. Of all the instruments at the command of man, there are none that tend in so large a degree to promote individuality on one hand and association on the other, as do gold and silver, properly therefore denominated the precious metals. We see association and individuality again. Do we see money? No. We see association and individuality. And the precious metals, silver and gold, and also paper currency, they promote individuality and association. Hence the phrase, Henry Carey says, money the instrument of association. Is Sir Robert Peel and free traders going to see association as the destiny for the currency? No, they're not going to circulate the currency. When Henry C. Carey is talking about, listen, if I'm talking about the precious metals, I'm going to have to talk about individuality and association, because the precious metals can do a whole lot of good for individuality and association, right? Henry Carey called them the precious metals, right? Well, if they're the precious metals, you got to circulate them properly. How are you going to circulate the currency? How are you going to circulate the gold and silver? right? Victor, go to the next slide. It should be an economic diagram. Okay, so we have the economic diagram, right? To the far left of the economic diagram, money is not contributing towards association nor individuality. Man is a slave of nature. Land is valueless. Raw materials are not worth that much. Finished commodities are worth that much. The currency is not circulating, right? If we go to the far right of the economic diagram, man has freedom. There's land in high value. Money as an instrument of association is right there. It's right there to the far right of the economic diagram, right? And if you take a look at this economic diagram, right, you're going to ask yourself, okay, Neil, where is the greatest circulation of the currency at? In the far left of the economic diagram or the far right of the economic diagram? Where the latent powers of man are becoming developed, where agriculture is a science, and where commerce is developing, right? That's the section where you're going to have the currency circulating the best, right? But not only is the currency circulating the best, that is where you are going to see that the government sees the population as precious. If we look to the far left of the economic diagram, what environmentalism, what buying the cheapest market, what slavery does, it doesn't see mankind as precious, right? How in the world are you going to call money a precious metal, but you're not going to call human beings precious? What precious things has the free trade crowd done for civilization? Genocide in Palestine. How is that precious? Trying to provoke thermonuclear war with Russia. How is that precious? Saying that the Belt and Road Initiative is a debt trap. How is that precious? We're not supporting the manned space program. We're not interested in fusion power like the Chinese are, right? The Chinese are doing precious things. The United States of America and the West are not, right? And so these bankers, right? This bad banking philosophy, right? If you take a look at this bad banking philosophy, right? How is it going to utilize money? It's not going to utilize money properly. Victor, go back to the previous slide. Okay, right? And once again, it's not going to promote association or individuality. Keep track of how many times I say association in the presentation. Association is very important. You see association to the far right of the economic diagram. Go back to the slideshow, Victor. The to the economic diagram. All right, and I ask you the question: who is using the currency the best? The Rocky Mountains, Kansas City, St. Louis, or Philadelphia, New York, and Massachusetts? It's Philadelphia, New York, and Massachusetts. When you use the currency the best, maybe you're using land the best too. I don't know. That's my hypothesis. That's my hypothesis, right? Now, those who use land the best, they make the noosphere. We look to the far left of the economic diagram. Now we're going to have countries. You have Sub-Saharan Africa, Gambia, Do they have the noosphere? Are they benefiting from massive basic economic infrastructure? Or is China, right? The Chinese are doing something with their precious metals. I'm sorry, the far left of the economic diagram, Europe, the United States, and unfortunately we have sub-Saharan Africa and the global south. They need to be developed, right? The most precious thing is the human being. If you ever talk about the precious metals and you do not have a high view of man, you're only going to implement Sir Robert Peel banking measures. You are not going to implement banking measures that's going to employ the currency into the physical economy, right? So if you employ money and credit into the physical economy, you are saying that we want to build up association and individuality. And money as the instrument of association, money as the precious metal, can only really be seen in a economy that's manifest in association. Now we're talking about banking, right? And I state again, I'm not talking about money much. I'm talking about banking philosophy, and I'm talking about association. I'm talking about how to organize an economy. I'm talking about how Earth is the great labor savings bank, right? Do free traders and environmentalists ever talk about Earth as the great labor savings bank? Do they ever say the precious metals are important for an economy? No. They say the precious metals are for speculation. That's why we need a Glass-Steagall to shut down this irrational banking philosophy, right? Such as long as we have this irrational banking philosophy, which goes hand in hand with centralization, which I would address later on, you are not going to see man participating in the intelligence of the creator. Take a look at the economic diagram again. Where are we going to see mankind participating in the intelligence of the creator more? Where man has freedom, where man makes high wages, where there's association, or where there's slavery, raw materials are cheap, finished commodities are dear, and land has no value. Where are we going to see the full potential of man? We're going to see the full potential of man at the far right of the economic diagram. And we have to acknowledge, if you're going to talk about the precious metals, you have to say life is precious. You have to say human life is precious. You have to say man is the immortal species, right? Because to the far right of the economic diagram, people believe that man is the immortal species. To the far left of the economic diagram, they don't. All right, next slide, Victor. Banking philosophy. Do you like the British now? Okay, the larger the amount of its debts, the greater being its power to make loans, and the larger becoming its dividends. There was thus at once produced an interest antagonistic to that of the society in which it operated. Whatever tended to diminish security elsewhere tended to increase the necessity for resorting to the one great institution that allowed no interest to its creditors. Further, whatever tended to lessen association, the facility of association, tended equally to augment the difficulty of finding satisfactory modes of investment, thus increasing the quantity of money lying unproductive to its owners in the vaults of the bank, to be used or not at the discretion of the directors, and for the profits of the bank alone. Okay, this is the third time that Henry Carey is speaking about association. Association is box office, right? I go out of my way to talk about association, right? And what Henry Carey is saying, when you do not have association, you're not going to have the best investments. You're going to have investments that barbarize man, that make man become a slave of nature, that have man take no responsibility before his God and fellow man. Yes, I'm saying that. When you destroy association, you destroy the potential of what a bank can do. You destroy the potential of mankind. You suppress it, right? And what am I saying? What am I saying, right? Okay. Well, Neil, you know what? I think that free trade is very good at creating investments for people. Okay. Free trade is good at is creating investments for people. Building windmills and solar panels, data centers, um, investing your money in an asset management, investing your money in an investor's bank. Oh, what is that? That is transportation of the currency. That is not circulating the currency. The bankers of the free trade school do not want to utilize money as in a way to positively affect the population's life, right? That's the British. The British didn't make banking laws to make to have association more evident in the economy. They made banking laws to have money lying unproductive to its owners. They made banking laws to not have money be the instrument of association. They made banking laws to increase free trade, to increase the gambling propensities of mankind, to make man a slave of nature, right? If you do not have association in your banking policy, do you think man is created in the image of his creator? Do you think that man should seek first the kingdom and God's righteousness? That's a good question, right? What is a good investment? What are the investments under association? The Belt and Road Initiative. What are one of the good investments under association? The Transcontinental Railroad. What are one of the good investments of association? FDR's New Deal, the TVA, the Cooley Dam. What are some of the great investments? Building up the machine tool sector. The United States of America said, if we are going to be independent in the 19th century, we need a machine tool sector. Is Wall Street and the city of London interested in the machine tool sector? Are they interested in the Belt and Road Initiative? No, they are not. Right? So the British are not going to have bankers that say, listen, you have to tell these countries that they have to invest in the machine tool sector and we'll help them grow a machine tool sector. They're going to say their bankers are not going to tell foreign countries that you have to build basic economic infrastructure. We have to give you nuclear technology, right? What do the British want countries to invest in? Solar panels, windmills, derivatives, cryptocurrency, and in the military industrial complex, right? Association makes the best type of investments. And I just showed it to you, right? Would you want to invest in the stock market, green technology, or would you want to invest in the Belt and Road Initiative? I would say I want to invest in the Belt and Road Initiative because my banking is all about association, right? What do you think of the British now, right? The British did not want to use banking to be productive. If we look again at that economic diagram, the British didn't want labor to be valued. The British didn't want man to be free. The British didn't want the currency to be in proper circulation. They wanted man to be a slave of nature. And if you have a policy that says I want man to be a slave of nature, what's your banking philosophy going to be like? Right? So now I'm giving you all a more concise picture of banking philosophy. Next slide, Victor. All right. The game of Sir Robert Peel. Sir Robert Peel was a prime minister for England. He oversaw the Irish potato famine, the genocide in Ireland. He oversaw the repeal of the Corn Laws, and he oversaw the 1844 Banking Act, which was disastrous for England. Imports increase and exports decrease, right? So Henry Carey is describing the British economy. Bullion going abroad. The bank is forced to sell securities. Prices falling. Businesses paralyzed. The roads half made cannot be completed. Tens of thousands of people find their property to have disappeared, and the bank, with difficulty, escaping from the ruin it had made, rejoices at the result of its operations and prepares to repeat them at the first opportunity. Such is the history of 1815, 25, 36, 39, and 47, at all of which periods the bank, having manufactured deposits by monopolizing security, was then itself misled into the belief that the increase of its own debts indicated an actual surplus of money. Henry Carey is talking about banking history, right? He is saying you got into banking crises when your imports increase and your exports decrease. That means your bullion is going abroad. That means you have no domestic commerce. That means you're buying in the cheapest market. You're playing the Sir Robert Peel game, right? And then the banks, they have to sell securities. Business is paralyzed. You call that a prosperous economy? Business is paralyzed. Bullion going abroad. The roads half made cannot be completed, right? And then the thing that Henry Carey says, only few political economists have said this. He says, after you get the crisis and it's over, the banks want to do the same thing over again. How can anybody be a politician and see this happening? 1815, 1825. Something should go up. The bullshit detector should go up. 1836, 1839, 1847. It's happening again and again and again. And they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. Right? Sir Archibald Allison, who was very critical of Sir Robert Peel, said this. Hold on. He says, Archibald Allison called the Bankers Act of 1844 an act for the more effectual transporting of panics from agriculture to commerce and for perpetuating commercial catastrophes in Great Britain. Why would a banker or a bank create crises again and again? That's what we're doing. That's what we're seeing today in the world, right? So Henry Carey is detailing to us what is detailing the game of Sir Robert Peel, right? They don't mind. Imports increase, exports decrease. You're buying you're buying goods and services. Who cares about that? Domestic commerce is not important. Bullion going abroad. It's going abroad to buy goods and services. Why are you complaining? Right? The banks are selling securities like mad. Oh, securities are gold. Nothing ever happens to securities. Are you sure? You're saying nothing ever happens to securities? Stock markets crash 1928. The one in the 80s, subprime mortgage collapse, those were securities, right? I mean, like, I'm sorry, right? Sir Robert Peel, right? To me, Sir Robert Peel's policies is no different than tulip mania that ravaged Europe. What was tulip mania? You had people buying tulips, bulbs that did not exist for outrageous prices. And people want to call that good banking? Oh, yes, I'm a good banker. I'm going to show you how to invest your money. Investing money is all about circulating the currency. Investing money is not about you. It's about circulating the currency and making man become the immortal species, right? And I'm sorry, if the banks are creating crises again and again, they don't really care about man participating in the creativity in the intelligence of the creator, right? So how come people are not talking about this banking history of the British? Well, what you got to understand with British free traders, they never talk about economic history. The only economists that talk about economic history in depth are protectionists and the American system of political economy. Next slide, Victor. An indictment on Sir Robert Peel. What's going to be the indictment on Sir Robert Peel? Listen closely. The currency needs no such regulator, but if there must be and one, its action should be rendered perfectly automatic, leaving it then to the proprietors of the little wheels to use the gearing needed for enabling them to attain as much or as little speed as they might require. It should be acted upon by the community instead of acting itself upon them. And then it might be consulted with the same confidence as the thermometer. The law that will produce this effect will not be that of 1844, which, with its cumbrous and really ridiculous machinery of banking department and department of issue, was totally unfitted to answer to end the proposed. It was framed with a view to changes in the amount of currency in use, which are ever slow and small in quantity, while it contained no reference to changes in the currency, seeking employment, always rapid and great in amount. Henry Carey is saying that Sir Robert Peel's Act of 1844 did nothing at all. But if you go online and type down Sir Robert Peel's Banking Act of 1844, it's declared the GOAT of legislation for banking. I'm making that up, but they're not going to tell the truth, right? Okay, so Henry Carey is saying, right? He's saying the Banking Act of 1844 didn't do the job and we shouldn't be surprised. He is saying, what would have done the job if the currency was seeking employment? If you regulated the currency seeking employment, as in increase it or decrease it whenever the time was needed, right? And that's very important because that's circulating the currency, right? You are not circulating the currency with the Bank Act of 1844. You are circulating the currency when you have the currency seeking employment. Employment into what? The physical economy. Sir Robert Peel was not for that. If we ever take a look at LaRouche's triple curve, Sir Robert Peel is for pumping up the financial aggregates with the monetary aggregates. And eventually you need more, you need more monetary aggregates, right? That's where you get the breakdown, right? And look at the physical economy. It's going to hell because the currency is not being circulated, because association has been taken out of the physical, out of the economy. The currency is not seeking employment. Sir Robert Peel did not want that. The British Free Trade School does not want that. Wall Street and the City of London do not want that. Right? Henry Carey also touches upon something else, right? He is saying that the little wheels, which is manufacturers, banking, and what's the other one? Hold on. Other one. And merchants, right? Okay. So they cannot determine the livelihood and life and living standards for the population. The population must, the population, the general welfare must act upon the sectors of the economy to make sure that the population thrives, right? Sir Robert Peel was not all about that, right? Henry Carey said, nope, these little wheels are going to be regulated. The little wheels are going to be regulated. And who were the little wheels again? Banking, merchants, manufacturers, right? And how is that going to happen, right? If the population is being screwed, do you think the currency is in is in good circulation? If the population is is in debt, poor, do you think the currency is in circulation? Do you think that the currency is seeking employment? I mean, we can take a look at the United States of America, right? The currency is for transportation. It's not for circulation of the currency. The currency is not seeking employment in the physical economy. The currency is looking to hype up bubbles like the crypto bubble. How come we can't have a manned space program in the United States of America? The reason why we can't have a manned space program in the United States of America is that we have congressmen and senators who thinks nothing is wrong with the Bank Act of 1844. No, we do not need the Bank Act of 1844. We need to have the currency in circulation. We need to have currency seeking employment. That means employment in the physical economy. That's banking. Banking philosophy is not rocket science. You need a whole lot of philosophy and economics, but you need the banking philosophy and the general welfare principle, right? Sir Robert Peel did not have the general welfare principle. When Henry Carey is saying the currency needs to seek employment in the physical economy, that's the general welfare principle. Victor, next slide, please. All right, so that's the triple curve, right? And I've already explained the triple curve, right? So when you have the physical economy going down, right? Currency is not in proper circulation. There's association is declining massively, right? The currency is not seeking employment. The upper charts, the financial aggregates and the monetary aggregates, right? They're not part of the physical economy. And the question is, right? If we do this, what's the state of our infrastructure? If we keep on neglecting our infrastructure and keep on neglecting the physical economy. Lynn wrote a book, So You Wish to Learn Economics, the best book of the 20th century in political economy. Lynn said that 1983, it's going to take $3 trillion to go back to the infrastructure standards that we had in 1970. I wonder how is it now, right? All they want to do, they create a massive deficit in basic economic infrastructure. Do they talk about it? Is Sir Robert Peel going to talk about that? Is the 1844 Banking Act going to talk about that? But hold on. Currency seeking employment in the physical economy will turn this upside down. The physical economy will be getting support from the National Bank, an infusion of credit, just like what FDR did, right? This is what we need. We need FDR. We do not need Sir Robert Peel. We need Henry C. Carey's banking philosophy. We do not need Sir Robert Peel's, the City of London, and Wall Street. We don't need them. All right, next slide show, Victor. Next slide. The Bank of England has too much power. Now, the Bank of England acquired the power to, guess what? Regulate the currency. I wonder what happened. The grant of this permission would seem almost to have been intended as a bonus offered to the bank to induce it to the production of changes in the currency, and for the reason that the more frequent they can be made, the larger must be its profits. Being a private corporation, the interests of the stockholders require of the directors that they shall so direct it as to give them the largest revenue. Seeing this, what better system could be adopted than one which, by swelling the deposits at the time when money is to be made abundant, enables the bank afterwards to profit by charging double or treble interest when it has been rendered scarce. No system was ever devised so well calculated to produce revulsions as that which gave to a single private corporation the privilege of regulating the currency, while compelling it to be the dependent altogether upon borrowed money for the transaction of its business. Now, if you ask somebody, do you think the central bank should be regulating the currency? They being so stupid, they say, we see nothing wrong with that. Well, there's a problem, and Henry Carey identified a problem, right? He said, how in the world would you induce banks or the government or the Bank of England to make changes in the currency? What is that going to do for the livelihood of the population? The prices of things are going to skyrocket. How is that good for the population? A government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That's not a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. It's a government of tyranny, right? And Henry C. Carey, right? Henry C. Carey, he made it known, right, that you cannot have a situation where you have a private corporation at whim changing the currency of a country, right? He said that's a no-no. Another thing that they were doing, right? And what you got to understand, no, let's back up. You have no head of state in the West talking about the currency troubles of foreign nations. They're not saying we have to move to a fixed exchange rate. We shouldn't see this happening, right? when they had the Asian tigers crisis, right? When Malaysia's currency was getting attacked by George Soros, what did LaRouche say? Fixed exchange rates. That's what that's what Mahathir did. He listened to Lin. How many bankers and politicians like fixed exchange rates? How many people who bet on currencies like fixed exchange rates? I cannot stand the thought of someone saying, yes, I invest in Forex. I speculate on currency. And they're shameless. They see nothing wrong with that. Oh, it's a good way to make money. No, 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 no. What you must do in all your endeavors is to promote man as the immortal species. And I'm sorry, if a bank thinks, if the central bank thinks they can play around with the currency, devalue it, and make life hell for the population, they're not doing a good service, right? Then we go even further, right? Henry Carey is saying they will raise the interest rates. They will raise the interest rates, sometimes double or treble, to do what? To destroy association, to destroy currency from seeking the proper channels, right? Paul Volcker did this in the late 1970s or 1980s, right? Industries could not get invested in. Farmers were being screwed. What was Congress and Senate doing? What was the president doing? What were economists doing? They don't care at all. They don't care at all about the physical economy, right? And if they don't care at all about the physical economy, you think they're going to like the British or not like the British? They're going to like the British, right? They're going to like Sir Robert Peel, right? And Carey says, finally, he says, no system was ever devised so well calculated to produce revulsions as that which gave to a single private corporation the privilege of regulating the currency. In the Constitution, in the U.S. Constitution, it says the Congress shall regulate the currency. Who's regulating the currency now for the United States of America? The Fed. Same thing with what the British did. Oh, and when did this happen for the British? When the Bank of England started regulating the currency. The Sir Robert Peel 1844 Banking Act. How low can you go, Sir Robert Peel? How low can you go? Right? And so, banking, the circulation of the currency is important. The regulation of the currency is important. You need fixed exchange rates, right? We don't want to see a situation where the currency is fluctuating. We don't want to see a situation where the interest rates are fluctuating, right? Because it's going to retard progress, right? And what we have to know, if you want to circulate the currency, you're going to have the currency seek employments in the proper channels, right? Now, what's the proper channels, right? What is a hands-on approach into doing proper banking and using credit properly? Well, what you got to think of it this way, right? You have a whole lot of water in these rivers, and they're going into the ocean. But that water can be used to develop other lands. So why don't you divert that water into areas that need it for growth? Sir Robert Peel is never going to do that. The Bank of England is never going to do that. FDR did that. FDR did that. Henry C. Carey advocated that. LaRouche advocated for that, right? We can't have a situation where mankind, because what you got, what you have to know, right? If you have a good banking philosophy, it's going to be a no-brainer that you see Earth as the great labor savings bank, and you're going to develop the Earth, right? And so this mentality of currency speculation, decreasing the currency, creating inflation, making interest rates astronomical, that that is not seeking to employ the currency properly, right? We have to seek proper employment for the currency. If we do not seek proper employment for the currency, we're going to have Lyndon LaRouche's triple curve, the part where the financial aggregates are skyrocketing and the monetary aggregates are pumping them up. We don't want that in banking. Next slide, Victor. Okay, centralization, what liberals will never fight. Yes, liberals will never fight centralization. They're hordes of free trade. They're concubines of the British system. Here's Henry Carey. Within the last 2 years, the system has been changed, and greatly for the better, by the passage of an act of parliament, folly recognizing limitation of liability. Associations may now therefore be formed for trading in money or for almost any other purpose, without incurring risk of loss beyond the amount invested. The risk of England tending, however, towards centralization, this measure, although in the right direction, can have but little effect, while the general English policy shall remain the same, looking exclusively to fostering trade at the expense of commerce, exporting men by hundreds of thousands to distant colonies, and thus diminishing the power of association, building up London at the expense of the rural portion of the kingdom, regarding exports and imports as the sole criterion of prosperity, and thus increasing by every movement the numbers and the power of those who live by means of simple appropriation and at the cost of those who seek to live by labor. All right. So Henry Carey is saying, okay, we have limited liability now in England, but we got a problem. The problem is that the British favor foreign commerce over domestic commerce. That's centralization, right? Centralization does not want to develop domestic commerce. It wants to develop fostering trade. Now, this is a bad banking philosophy, right? Centralization. Centralization, death, war, and poverty, death, war, and slavery, right? Centralization is not going to create anything of the sort that's going to be good for civilization, right? Centralization, which is a British free trade policy, centralization, which Henry Carey spoke about first in his past, the present, and future, right? Okay. All right. So prosperity is not based on imports and exports, right? The British the British banking philosophy thinks that. Do people see that a bad banking philosophy, a bad economic policy, and a bad banking policy are the goals of the British? Centralization is not going to allow for good ideas to take root. Centralization will never divert water to places that need to enrich civilization. Domestic commerce only has the policy of peace through development. You want you you want to gloat about foreign commerce, which Western powers favoring foreign commerce over domestic commerce is calling for an end to geopolitics, right? Okay. So, which is calling for an end of geopolitics? Centralization or circulate the currency properly, have it seek employment in the physical economy? I can tell you this. People that like centralization, they like geopolitics, right? They have a bad banking philosophy. They have no interest on building anything dealing with peace through development, right? If they don't want peace through development, how are they going to circulate the currency? Are they really going to care about circulating the currency for the physical economy? They're not, right? All right. And what we see is that the British, they like foreign commerce, right? This whole presentation is about banking. Henry C. Carey is saying, we're not going to have a good banking policy if we still have centralization, right? Take a look at the United States of America during the time periods of free trade people, such as Grover Cleveland, such as President Tyler, such as Andrew Jackson, such as Woodrow Wilson, right? What did they do to have the banking policy of the United States of America mirror protectionism? The only times the banking policy of the United States of America mirrored protectionism was when we actually had protectionism, right? You are not going to have a good banking philosophy if you do not want domestic commerce. If you say, yeah, we want free trade in the West, we're not concerned with a good banking philosophy. We're not concerned with a good trade policy. All we want is free trade. Buy in the cheapest market. What is buying in the cheapest market, Sir Robert Peel's favorite play, going to do? It's going to gravitate towards centralization, right? And if we have centralization, right, exports and imports are seen as gold. They're not. We need a physical economy. We need domestic commerce. Because when we have domestic commerce, the banking philosophy is good. We have to get rid of centralization. We have to get rid of a bad banking philosophy. If we do this, we can get rid of geopolitics. Because what is geopolitics ran off of? Geopolitics is ran off of a bad economic policy, bad view of man, bad banking philosophy. You have those together, all you're going to get is geopolitics, and we can't have that. So that's pretty much the end for the presentation.